abhibhuto nisatvaha pararte pararte kurute kurute sprisham spriham prararte kurute spriham pararte kurute spriham vartayam lupyamanayam arabhadyayam punah punah lobhadi bhutani sattva lobhadi bhutoni sattva pararte kurute spruham pararte kurute spruham vartayam lupyamanayam arabhadyayam punah punah lobhadi bhutani sattva pararte kurute spruham vatyayam lupyamanayam pararte kurute spruham vatayam lupyamanayam arabhayam punah punah lobhadi bhutoni sattva prarate kurute spridam vatayam arabhyam punah punah lobhadi bhutoni sattva pararte kurute spurham. Please repeat after me. Vartayam. When his occupation. Lupya manayam. Is hampered. Arabhadyayam. Undertaken. Punah punaha. Again and again. Lobha. By greed. Abhibhutaha. Overwhelmed. Nisattvaha. Ruined. Pararte. For the wealth of others. Kurute spruham. He longs. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. When he suffers reverses in his occupation, he tries again and again to improve himself. But when he is baffled in all attempts and is ruined, he accepts money from others because of excessive greed. Please repeat after me. When he suffers, reverses in his occupation, he tries again and again to improve himself. But when he is baffled in all attempts and is ruined, he accepts money from others because of excessive greed. This verse doesn't have purport, so I will read the next two verses. You don't need to repeat. Kutumba bharana kalpo. You don't need to repeat. Manda bhagyo vrithodyamaha. Shriya vihina kripano. Dhyayan chavasiti mudadihi. Translation. Thus, the unfortunate man, unsuccessful in maintaining his family members, is bereft of all beauty. He always thinks of his failure, grieving very deeply. The next verse, Evam swa bharana kalpam tat kalatradyas tatha nadriyante yatha purvam Hinasha ivago jaram. Translation. Seeing him unable to support them, his wife and others do not treat him with the same respect as before. Even as miserly farmers do not accord the same treatment to their old and worn out oxen. Purport. Not only in the present age, but from time immemorial, no one has liked an old man who is unable to earn in the family. Even in the modern age, in some communities or states, the old men are given poison so that they will die as soon as possible. In some cannibalistic communities, the old grandfather is sportingly killed, and a feast is held in which his body is eaten. The example is given that a farmer does not like an old bull who has ceased to work. Similarly, when an attached person in family life becomes old and is unable to earn, he is no longer liked by his wife, sons, daughters, and other kinsmen, and he is subsequently neglected. What to speak of not being given respect? It is judicious, therefore, to give up family attachment before one attains old age and take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. One should employ himself in the Lord's service so that the Supreme Lord can take charge of him, and he will not be neglected by his so-called kinsmen. Wow, that's a strong purport. Slap in the face purport. Om Agyana Timirandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Shakshurunmilitamena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupakadamayam Tadati Swapadantikam. Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Uda Pada Kamalam Shri Gurun Shri Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sakrajadam Sahagana Raghunathan Vitam Tamsa Jivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishaganvitamscha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale Shrimadhe Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nivishesha Shunyavadi Pashatya Desha Tharine Vancha Kalpatarubhyasha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namine Gaurativse Namaha. Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sude Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. I was born in the darkness of ignorance. My spiritual master opened my eyes with the torch of knowledge. Offer my respectful obeisances unto him. Mukham karoti vatsalam, pango langayate girim. Yat kripa tamaham vande, Shri Guru, Shri Tinatarinam. Tavaivasmi. Na jivami tavai vina iti vigyade vidvam nayamam charanantikam. Hare Krishna everyone. Welcome to this morning's Bhagavatam class. Chapter Description of Adverse Fruitive Activities, spoken by Kapila Dev to his mother Devahuti. How is it now? Can you hear me? Good. Okay. These verses pretty much reflects the mood of the Vaishnava song Bhaja Hure Mana, a song which Prabhupada sings quite often. Maybe if you have time, we can try to sing the song later. So a bit of a context here. A few chapters before, Devahuti approached his son Kapila, who is the Supreme Personality of Godhead himself, and asked him, we've been associating, our mind and our senses have been associating with this material nature for time immemorial. Is it even possible for us to free ourselves from free our mind and our senses from the infliction of this material energy? So we've been bound for so long, can we even think about getting out from these attachments, from the influence of this material nature? So to respond to that question, Kapila Dev spoke last 3 or 4 chapters. So initially he introduced Yoga Mishra Bhakti. Bhakti, devotional service, with contamination, with yoga, elements of yoga attached to it. Then he spoke Jnana or Dhyana Mishra Bhakti, devotional service mixed with meditation and knowledge. And after that, he spoke pure devotional service in the previous chapter. Pure devotional service which is not contaminated by yoga, jnana and other processes. So he didn't finish off there. He continues to describe the fate of an individual, a fate of a living entity who ignores the process of elevating himself from the material bond into spiritual life. What happens to him? What is his state? So he goes into the detailed description of a materialistic person. And an individual. So when we say materialistic person, what it means? A person who is performing various fruitive activities or various activities to gain wealth, fame, and other opulences so that he can engage his senses, or so that he can enjoy his senses through these material results. So he is describing the adverse fruitive activities. Generally, it's a notion, it's a modern notion nowadays at least, that people just want to hear good things. They don't want to hear the negative side. People just want to, people want to go to motivational speakers like Tony Robbins, and they just want to hear positive enforcement. They don't want to, they ignore the negative aspect. In reality, the negative aspect is the reality what we are living in. That's what we are going through. The positive aspect is an aspiration, we try to follow. But what happens is, if you ignore the negative reality, you do not get an impetus to strongly take up the positive aspect. Even recently I got a call from the temple and I was told, "Oh Prabhu, your classes are a bit controversial and harsh. You should mellow it down." I was like, okay. But that's not what Bhagavatam is. Bhagavatam says both positive and negative. It showcases both. Isopanishad, text number 11. What is that verse? Vidyamscha avidyamscha yastat vedobhyam saha. One should know vidya, knowledge, and one should also know avidya, the nascence. By knowing both, one knows firmly that he has to give up nascence. If one just talks about the positive, he would not understand the negative situation the person is stuck in. So he will think, okay, I will just have to add positive things and I will just keep doing all the nonsense what I've been doing for time immemorial. So that doesn't really liberate. It's like the famous analogy what Prabhupada gives. In Bengal, in West Bengal, it's full of rivers. The Ganges splits into many tributaries full of rivers. And the easiest way to... Can somebody close the door? The easiest way to navigate in Bengal is to take a rowing boat. People just jump on a boat and you can cover a lot of distance. So there was a wedding party, and the next day was the wedding. It was a hot summer day and the sun just went down. It was cooling from the Ganges wind, from the wind from the Ganges. So the wedding party jumped on a boat to go to the wedding arena, and the wedding was the next day morning. And they say, the sun set, so it got a bit dark, and the boatmen started rowing, and everybody, because of the nice cool breeze, fell asleep on the boat. And the next day morning, they all woke up to see the boat haven't moved an inch. The boat was just in the same place because they forgot to take the anchor. They've been rowing, doing all this positive effect, but the anchor hasn't been lifted. So they've been stuck in the same place. So going back to Isopanishad, Vidya and Vidya, so one has to learn the positive aspect, the inspirational aspect, and also the negative aspect, the defects of being stuck in the material energy, the nonsense we've been doing for all this time immemorial, which has been keeping us in this material world. So one has to learn both. If you just focus on one element, just the positive, you might get stuck like a boatman, thinking the situation you are is comfortable, we can adapt to those situations, and we make no progress. And if you focus only on the negative, that's no good neither. If you focus only on the negative, the material energy is so cruel, you become extremely depressed, and you can't function. It's cripplingly depressed. So one becomes either suicidal or becomes a Mayavadi. He says, okay, this world is really hard, so anything to do with interaction, anything to do with objects will be cruel. So I'm coming to a conclusion that everything is zero. So you get into that conclusion. So both are wrong. It is wrong to be stuck in a place. It is wrong to get depressed. It is wrong to become a Mayavadi. So we don't want any of these things. So one has to have a balance of both the negative and the positive. So even in Bhagavad Gita, when Krishna starts, he doesn't start with what is it? Raja Vidya Raja Goviyam Pavitram Idam Uttamam Susukam Kartam Avyayam. He's not starting Bhagavad Gita by saying, oh, this process is wonderful, it's easy to perform, it's lovely. No, he doesn't start that. He starts by saying, Asosyan Anvasosvaswam Pragyavasam Sabasase Gatasum Agatasum Cha Nanuso Chanti Pandita. Arjuna, you're talking like a fool. You think you're talking very intelligent words, but your words appear to be a word of a fool. He starts with a very strong statement. Imagine calling a prince, very intelligent prince, very successful Arjuna, and Krishna calls him a fool. Slap in the face. So we can see that both elements are prescribed. One has to be told that he is engaged in activities which is not good for him. And then he has to be told activities which will make his life better. So both has to be presented. Like if you go to the doctor. Nowadays the modern doctor prescriptions are, you do whatever nonsense you want to do. You just eat whatever you want to eat and just take this medicine. That's how they treat. They just treat the symptoms. But when you go to Ayurveda, it gives certain restrictions. And it says, if you have a particular ailment, avoid this particular vegetables or this particular foodstuff. And then have these medicine on top of it. So it gives you some restrictions. And then it also gives medicine. So the restrictions cures and the instructions uplifts, brings you to a higher state. In the purport of Isopanishad, verse 11, Prabhupada writes that miseries of this material world is a indirect reminder for our unnatural attachment to this dead matter. So we are attached, we are not this basic instruction of Bhagavad Gita, we are not this body, we are spirit soul. And as a spirit soul, we are full of knowledge, full of bliss, and we live for eternity. But we have associated ourselves with a dead matter, which is the body. This body is a dead matter. And this dead matter eventually degrades and dies. Eventually degrades and dies. So, the body is designed in such a way, the material nature of Krishna has designed this body in such a way that this body always throws tantrum. It's never comfortable. Even though we try really hard to make this world a very comfortable place. But it always, as a child, when you're taking birth, it's very painful. That's why no baby comes out laughing with a big smile. No, it comes out screaming and yelling. It's very painful, from the very beginning. Of course, we forget that. But when when we are 2-3 years old, the teeth fall off, or the teeth starts coming out, and it's very painful. It's very, very painful experience. Imagine, little baby, pain tolerance is really low, and this bone poking out of your flesh, protruding out. Very painful. But we forget. And then, and then you grow, disease and other ailments, you have to suffer. And then comes old age. And that's a topic discussed here. And old age is very painful. When you ask an old person, he says, "Oh God, just getting up in the morning is difficult. You can't. The knees are aching. And you need a chair to sit down." So old age. So the body constantly is reminding that this is not a very comfortable situation. So an intelligent person will ask, if this is not a comfortable situation, what is a comfortable situation? Okay? And the natural thing is, you try to fix it through material mediums. But when you look at the scriptures, it says, yeah, you can make some adjustments using the material facilities, but the real liberation from these anomalies is to get out of this material world and establish ourselves in our spiritual identity, or in simple terms, going back to Godhead, going back to Krishna, where you are given your original body back, or you attain your original body, which is not inflicted by these three modes of material nature, which is constantly reminding you that you don't belong here. You don't belong here. So for example, if you take a jail, and if the jail just gives all the nice arrangements, you don't want to get out. Like in Eastern Europe, I heard that Western Europe is much more affluent. Martin, where are you from?
Germany.
You're from Germany, okay. So that's Western. So in Eastern Europe, I've heard that there's not much facilities. People who are homeless, there's not much facilities. In winter, it gets a bit cold, miserably cold. So people would just commit petty crime, so they just can go to jail for 3 months, and be in the jail when the cold. They get a night shelter and food during that period, and then after that they can get out. So same thing. The material world is it's made in such a way it's not giving that facility so that you can just live here in a long term. And it's always reminding you that you don't belong here. This body is temporary, so that we can make an endeavor to get out. So coming back to the context here, where the old age is being focused, is being detailed. So what happens? A person works very hard, maintains his family, his children. To maintain the family and children, one goes through a lot of hardship. He works 8-10 hours a day, and he works for not so pleasant people. The managers, the colleagues, the customers. Not necessarily they treat you all well, even though nowadays we come into this society, where we in the corporate world, there's a lot of anti-bullying. There's this and that. You have to treat your employees nicely. But all this happens. But there's still we are put in a not so comfortable situations. You can still have your customers mistreating you. So when I left the temple, I worked in a call center for Commonwealth Bank, my first job. People are brutal. And I thought, I will just find a better job, become this and that. And Now I have a team, then my customers, same thing. They can be horrible sometimes. So to make a little bit of money, we work hard and put up with all this trouble so that we can have a nice family, we can have a nice wife, children, and so you facilitate those options. So you take the inconvenience of the suffering what you go through. You actually make it a pleasurable thing. You start saying, I'm tolerating this inconvenience so I can spend time with my family and children and wife. If the family and children. But the Bhagavatam says the reality is, as soon as you stop producing the same wife and the same children who looked up to you, do not care anymore. You just become a burden. You just become an inconvenience for them. You can see in Prabhupada's life, these descriptions is exactly happened in Prabhupada's life. When Prabhupada had a successful business, he had his family, they were all very nice to him. When his business started failing in Lucknow, when he went to Bombay or Jhansi to start the League of Nations, he requested his son to come and assist him. They were not interested. In Lilamrita, if you read, Prabhupada in Jhansi, when things is not going his way, he wanted 5,000 rupees or something. So he goes back to Calcutta to see if he can come up with that money to buy this building, to start a mission. His wife and children, they are moved back with Prabhupada's in-laws, and Prabhupada has to stay in the in-laws' place, and they didn't respect him. They didn't respect him at all. Prabhupada, so that's when Prabhupada asked his wife, do you choose tea or me? And the wife said, tea. And this is Prabhupada, a gentleman, worked hard all his life, an absolute gentleman. There is no person more befitting to be a gentleman than Prabhupada. And this is how he was treated by his own family. But Prabhupada took it as an opportunity and also to set an example. He immediately left home. He went and stayed with some of his godbrothers in Calcutta, and then he borrowed few rupees and then boarded a train. In fragile old age, this is the family you've been supporting. You gave birth to them. So on a man's ego, it's very difficult to swallow. Children, you give them a material body. The father gives the life. The father gives the life, and it brings them to this material world and gives them an opportunity to have a human form for a spirit soul who is just wandering in this material world. The father gives an opportunity to take birth in this, in a human form of life, so that one can. So it's such a important role, and not only that, the father feeds the children. And what happens? From a woman's point of view, she can't produce a child by herself. It's a man who gives the seed. So the role is much more important. I'm not telling it is the mother's role is less important, but the seed, the trigger, the Vishesha Karana, the special reason is more important than the Samanya Karana, the obvious reason. So the trigger is the father, and he gives birth to a child and feeds them, brings them up. Imagine being neglected. It's a very painful predicament to be in. So that's how the world is. As soon as the father becomes impediment for your own sense gratification, you're neglected. So in Western countries, what they do, they drop the parents off in old age homes, where they are. The old age homes are notorious in this country. I mean, even in Australia, there's so many class actions taken because the old age people are just mistreated. My friend, he comes and cleans my place regularly. He looks after an old age old lady. She's 107 years old. She was born before the harbour bridge was built, and she saw the harbour bridge actually being built, and she's still around. And he goes and visits her, and he says the situation there is it's quite miserable. The food what they give has no nutrition. They give them powdered potato mash with frozen vegetables steamed. That's all you get. So it's not like in the Western countries you have more opulence and all. It's not like you're looking after your old parents. You just drop them off in the old age home, and they're quite unhappy there, with no social interactions and all. So here Prabhupada gives more extreme examples, like in Papua New Guinea or in Fiji. These used to be the norm before the Western civilization took up. They were cannibals, and they used to just kill their parents, old people, and eat. And it's not like he's exaggerating. This actually happened right in our backyard just a few hundred years ago. This used to happen. So these are the realities. So Prahlad Maharaj in chapter 7, text 5, Canto 7, chapter 5, text 5, Prahlad Maharaj addresses father. What is it? Tat sadhu manye suramurti, what is it? Suravarya dehinam sada samudvigna diyam asadgrahat hitvatma patam graha anda kupam vanam gatho yad dharim ashrayet. So what he says, most of tat sadhu manye, best of the demons, he's addressing his father, best of the demons, sada samudvigna, most of your best part of your life, you are spent in anxiety. So if you know the story of Hiranyakashipu, he was he was quite anxious that Vishnu will come and kill him. So he went through this trouble, real trouble to do all this austere meditation, so that he can get all these powers, so he can be deathless. So he goes through this austerity. So Prahlad Maharaj says, most of your good life, you went through a lot of anxiety to protect yourself from death. And you completely ignored the path which could Atma papam? You completely ignored the path which is supposed to benefit you. But you immersed yourself in andakupam, the deep, dark well of family life. And andakupam. So he instructs, immediately, vanam gato, immediately leave to the forest to better your life. better your life. So that's the instruction what Prahlad Maharaj says, gives. So don't stick around and embarrass yourselves. As an old man, just go. So what it means, in the Varnashram system, the Brahmacharya, Grahastha and Vanaprastha ashram is very significant, at least for the higher classes. So when, at least the higher classes, when they hit the age, right age, they voluntarily leave home. They voluntarily leave home. They are not left to be treated badly by their children and wife. They voluntarily leave home at certain age and start engaging directly in pure devotional service. Engaging in directly in taking shelter of Krishna and trusting on Krishna, for their protection. And of course, in old age, in previous ages, you can go to the forest, and the forest supplied all the necessary ingredients. Nowadays, we don't have those facilities. So what we people practicing devotional service in modern age should make an effort that when they hit certain age, they should voluntarily move close to a temple, move close to the farm community, or move close to, or go to the dhams, and spend their life focusing more on their spiritual activities, and get out of this material world. Start depending on Krishna more. And of course, this detachment won't come easily if you haven't gone through the brahmacharya training when you're young. So the idea of having this brahmacharya training is important, that when you retire, you know how to sustain yourself. You know how to cook for yourself. Number one, you know how to live by yourself. For a lot of people, to live without somebody else is very difficult. So in brahmacharya life, you're trained to live by yourself, without the family or the backup of it. So you have the training. You're also given the training how to cook for yourself, how to wash your own clothes, how to keep yourself clean. It's not like the mummy is doing your laundry. You wake up and there's breakfast. You don't know how it got there. So nice, but the Vedic system is preparing you for the later ashrams. So preparation during brahmacharya. So when you leave home, so you know how to maintain yourself, how to cook for yourself, how to clean yourself, how to wash your clothes, and so that you can focus more on spiritual life. So that's why the various ashrams and varnas are quite important. So they are designed in such a way one can give up the material nature, material involvement with the material life, and then focus on spiritual life more. So we got 8:43. Do you want to play? Bhaja Hariman. So as discussed, let's sing this song. Bhajahure manam Srinanda Nandana Abhaya Charanara Vindore. Srinanda Nandana Abhaya. Bhajahure mana Srinanda Nandana Abhaya Charanara Vindore. Bhajahure mana Srinandanandana Abhaya Charanara Vindore Dulabha manava janama satsange Dulabha manava janama satsange Dulabha manava janama satsange Tara e Baba Sindore Tara e Baba Tara e Baba Sindore Bhajahure mana Srinandanandana Abhaya Charanara Vindore Bhajahure mana Srinandanandana Abhaya Charanara Sita Atapa Vata Parishana Edini Jamini Jagire Sita Atapa Vata Parishana Edini Jamini Jagire Sita Atapam Vata Parishana Edine Jamini Jagire Sita Atapa Vata Parishana Edine Jamini Jagire Edina Vipale Suevina Kripana Durjana Chapala Sukalaba Lagire Vale Zevina Kripana Durjana Chapala Sukalaba Vivale Sevina Kripana Durjana Chapala Sukalaba Lagire Vivale Sevina Kripana Durjana Japala Sukalaba Bhajahure mana Srinandanandana Abhaya Charanara Vindore Bhajahure mana Srinandanandana Abhaya Charanara Vindore Edine Yovana Putra Parijana Hide kiya che paradhi dhire Edina Yovana Putra Parijana Edina Edina Yovana Putra Parijana Ite ke ache parati dire Yovana Putra Parijana Ite ke ache parati dire Kamala tala jala jivana tala mala Kamala Kamala thala jala divana tala mala Pajahu hari padani tire Pajahu hari padani Bhajaho Hari Padaniti. Bhajahure Mana Srinanda Nandana Abhaya Charanara Bindore. Bhajahure Mana Srinanda Nandana Abhaya Charanara Bindore. Shavana Kirtana Smarana Vandana Pada Sevana Dasya Re. Shavana Kirtana Smarana Vandana Pada Sevana Dasya Re. Shavana Kirtana Smarana Vandana Pada Sevana Dasya Re. Shavana Kirtana Smarana Vandana Pada Sevana Pujana Sakijana Atmani Vedana. Pujana Sakijana Atmani Vedana. Pujana Sakijana Atmani Vedana. Pujana Sakijana Atmani Vedana. Govinda Dasarabhilasha-re. Govinda Dasarabhilasha-re. Govinda Dasarabhilasha-re. Bhajahure Mana Srinanda Nandana Abhaya Charanara Bindore. 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 Yeah, the song is quite appropriate in this context. The verses we've been discussing, so I thought we will sing. It's pretty much the purport or commentary on these verses in a more simple language. Translation: O mind, just worship the lotus feet of Son of Nanda, which makes one fearless. Having obtained this rare human birth, cross over this ocean of worldly existence through the association of saintly persons. So here, the assurance given is one becomes fearless. Old age is a very fearful situation. One might ask themselves, oh, if I leave the support of my family, my support structure, if I leave my family, my children, all the wealth I've accumulated, the house I've worked hard, who's going to maintain me? I'm going to just die in the street. Yeah, of course you will, if you haven't taken shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord. So here, Govinda Das sings that if you've taken shelter, firm shelter of the lotus feet, you become fearless because you know Krishna will provide in any circumstances. The example is Prabhupada going to New York. Imagine, late 60s, jumping on a boat to go to New York, a foreign land, completely, nowadays, you have your Google Maps, you have internet, you can read TripAdvisor commentaries, where to stay, where not to stay. You have all this. Imagine just going in old age. Plus you have your own, it's not like you can just go and eat in a restaurant. People commies travel. They just go to a city. Oh yeah, I'll go and eat here. I'll go and eat there. That's not the case. Sannyasi. What he eats is he has to cook for himself. And he was in real anxiety. Am I going to even get vegetables? Going to the Western world. So fearless because of taking shelter on the lotus feet of Krishna. Does anybody want to read the next one?
Through both day and night, I have been sleepless, suffering the pains of heated food, the wine and the wind, uselessly solving wicked and miserably men for a moment's flickering appears.
Yeah. So the translation I have is slightly different. It says, I've served uselessly wicked and miserly men, the materialistic people who we deal with. Of course, when you're grahastha life, you have to, but when you get to a certain age, you should ask yourself, why am I doing this? Why am I here? One has to ask himself, why am I dealing with these materialistic people, who are miserly, who are wicked? They are only looking for their own benefit. Why am I serving them? The flickering happiness is what holding me back. When the association of wife, the little children, that's what holding me back. But now they are grown old and they don't want you. So what is holding you back? So that's number 2. Number 3.
What assurance of real happiness is there in all one's wealth, youthfulness, sons, and family members? This life is fluttering like a drop of water on a lotus petal. Therefore, you should always serve and worship the divine feet of Lord Hari.
So we are all very proud of our youth, the wealth we have accumulated, the children we have given birth, and the family members who we have supported. But when it comes to old age, none of these things are going to support you. Your youth is gone. The vibrant youth we have. Well, at least I used to have, kind of dwindling now. It's gone. The wealth. The family is just waiting for you to die so they can take the money, more or less. And the children and the wife, they are busy with their own things. So none of these support structure, what you thought is going to back you up, doesn't want you anymore. And in spite of that, the life you have is very flickery. It can go off any time. I can give an example here. Ramai Maharaj, his father worked hard all his life, worked very hard all his life, and he had a desire to go on a cruise. Have you guys heard this story? He had a desire to go on the cruise. So he worked out, so when he retired, he saved up money, he wanted to go on the cruise, he was really looking forward to. And just before he got on the ship, he had a heart attack and died. He couldn't get on the cruise. So, work hard. You want to enjoy your retirement. And even if you saved up a nest to enjoy and you want to do, I'm going to work hard now. And then when I retire, I'm going to, travel. But you never know, you're dead in a moment. So that's text 3. Text 4.
It is the desire and great longing of Govinda Das to engage himself in the 9 processes of bhakti, namely hearing the glories of the Lord Hari and chanting those glories, constantly remembering him and offering prayers to him, serving the Lord's lotus feet, serving the Supreme Lord as a servant, worshipping him with flowers and incense and so forth, serving him as a friend and completely offering the Lord one's self.
Yeah. So, the predicament, we understand last 3 verses, what is our situation, the material situation. So one engages in devotional service, in the 9 process of devotional service. Having this understanding, the platform we are is unstable, it's not natural. So the 4th verse, engaging in devotional service, it gives you the urgency. It gives you the urgency. Even though the devotional service is pleasurable, one might become lazy. So having this understanding of avidya gives one an urgency. I need to get out. I need to engage in these activities. I need to perform devotional service. So that gives you the urgency. So that's why the avidya aspect is important. So if you ignore the avidya aspect, then you'll think, oh, I'm comfortable, I will just do devotional service in my leisure. When time suits me, I will perform devotional service. You ask Prabhu, I will see, I will see, you don't come for Mangalarti. Oh, Prabhu, I'm busy, I will come when the time suits me. So the urgency is gone. But if you constantly remind yourself of the situation, the predicament we are in, it gives you the urgency so that you can engage in devotional service more rigorously. And what happens, one engages in devotional service rigorously, he becomes purified. He goes back to Godhead. So he doesn't need to take birth in this material world. In that note I will finish. If you have any questions or comments. Okay, good. Hare Krishna. Granth Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Shri Prabhupada ki jai. Shri Prabhupada ki jai. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyo patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha.